If You Lived in the Time of the American Revolution by Kate Moore, illustrated by Daniel O'Leary. This will be pages 14 through 31. What started the Revolution? The first settlers in the colonies liked having British help and protection. British soldiers were there to help them and fight Native American enemies and to keep other countries such as France and Spain from invading. It was like your mother watching over you. However, as they grew older, you will want more freedom to make your own decisions. That is how the colonists felt. The colonists grew tired of following British rules. England controlled trade and told people where they could settle. They forced the colonists to provide housing and food for British soldiers sent to protect them. Since 1760, the colonists had also had to pay taxes for various products under a law called the Stamp Act of 1765. The colonists had to pay extra money for newspapers, land deeds, card games, dice games, and even for graduation diplomas. The colonists had no direct way to complain, since no one from the colonies was allowed to be a member of the British Parliament, which made the rules. James Otis, a Boston lawyer, stirred up the colonists when he said they should not pay taxes until they could send a person to speak for the colonies in Parliament. Taxation without representation is tyranny, he explained. After years of protests, the British took away all the taxes except the one on tea. They did not satisfy the patriots. On December 16, 1773, angry patriots dressed as Mohawk Indians dumped 342 crates of tea into the Boston harbor. They shouted, "Rally, Mohawks! Bring out your axes and tell King George we'll pay no taxes on his foreign tea." King George decided to punish Boston for the Boston Tea Party by closing the port. Nothing would go in or out of the city until the tea was paid for. The city told the king it was sorry and that this had happened. Some people thought it was time for the colonies as a group to protest British taxes. In September of 1774, men from the colonies met together in Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, called Continental Congress. This group became the informal government of the colonies. Bad feelings continued. Finally, British soldiers and patriots fought at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, on April 19, 1775. This was the start of the American Revolution. Who were the Loyalists? About 1/3 of the people living in the colonies wanted to remain as citizens of England. They stayed loyal for different reasons. Number 1, they believed the king had the right to rule the colonies and that his laws were fair. Number 2, they were afraid of the British soldiers. Number 3, they had family in England and didn't want to put them in danger. And number 4, they felt that the government run by rich patriots would be worse. These people were known as Loyalists, Royalists, Friends of the Government, the King's Friends, or Tories. Some Loyalists joined the British Army and became regular British soldiers, called redcoats or lobsterbacks, by the patriots because of the color of their uniforms. Others formed Loyalist units and fought with the British. Among these were the Loyal Greens, King's American Regiment, the Queen's Loyal Rangers, and the Royal American Regiment. Many Native Americans, including the Iroquois and Seneca nations, joined the British side. So did thousands of African Americans. They had been slaves brought over to the colonies from Africa against their will to work on plantations in the South, or born in the colonies as slaves. The British gave them their freedom to return for their help. Soldiers from Germany called were paid by the British to come and help their troops. Many people who had recently come to the colonies from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Germany also remained loyal to the King of England. There were so many Loyalists in New York City that it became known as the Tory capital of America. Delaware and the southern colonies also had a large number of Loyalists. All types of people were Loyalists, including lawyers, merchants, ministers, government officials, farmers, and workers. Who were the patriots? In the beginning, the patriots were the people in the colonies who wanted England to remove taxes. But soon the word liberty was being heard. The patriots no longer wanted the British to be British Americans. They wanted to be Americans. They supported the Continental Congress as a way to rule themselves. They started thinking of themselves as the United Colonies. Patriots were known by many names, including rebels, Liberty Boys, the sons or daughters of liberty, colonials, and Whigs. About 1/3 of the people living in the 13 colonies were patriots. When war broke out, the Continental Army was formed with men from the colonies and a few men from Canada. Most Native Americans were on the British side, but some tribes helped the patriots. The patriots enlisted slaves to fight for them after England had already taken on thousands of African American soldiers, although more blacks joined. Although more blacks joined the British Army, it is thought that about 5,000 fought for the patriots. Since slaves did not have last names, many gave themselves names such as Liberty or Freedom. One unit from Connecticut included men named Sharp, Liberty, and Cuff, Freedom. In 1778, France joined the Patriots' side. They sent money, troops, and a navy. Spain and Holland entered the war in 1779, supplying money to the Patriots. Did everyone in the colonies take sides? No. Many people tried to stay neutral, not choose a side, during the war. Some changed sides depending on what was happening. Many families split because of different views about the war. Benjamin Franklin was a well-known patriot. His son, William, was the royal governor of New Jersey and warned the people in that colony not to act against the king. William became the head of the Board of American Loyalists. George Washington was the leader of the Continental Army, and his older half-brother, Lawrence, was a Loyalist. Some people hoped to stay out of the war entirely. The religion of the Quakers and the Mennonites did not allow them to fight, although some did take sides. Others were not free to express openly their true feelings, but were expected to go along with the views of their household. These included the slaves and indentured servants, men and women who had to work for someone else for a number of years to pay off a debt. You could not always be sure how someone felt about the war. There were no lines dividing each side. Your family might be a patriot and your next-door neighbors Loyalists. In some families, a couple of family members would travel to Britain and the rest would stay in the colonies. In this way, the family was sure to be on the winning side no matter which side won. How would your life have changed after the Declaration of Independence? The Declaration of Independence was written mainly by Thomas Jefferson and adopted by the Continental Congress in 1776. The Declaration lists 27 ways the king had hurt the colonies. Patriots agreed with the Declaration. They now viewed the colonies as 13 states making one nation. The Declaration divided many families, friends, and neighbors. Some patriots were against British taxes, but did not favor a total break from Britain. John Dickinson, a member of the Congress from Philadelphia, spoke out strongly, saying, "Declaring our independence at this time like this is like burning down our house before we have another." Some of these patriots began siding with the British, and even moved to England. Men who wanted independence went to fight with the Continental Army or with their local militia. In Massachusetts, they were known as Minutemen because they could be ready to fight in a minute. More soldiers came from Massachusetts and Connecticut than any other area. With men away from home, family life changed. Women had to run farms and manage businesses. Children helped harvest crops and made sure animals were fed and watered. Sometimes fathers and brothers would return home to help plant or harvest crops and then go back to their units and the fighting. Money could be scarce for soldiers' families because soldiers often didn't get paid for over a year. What happened to the Loyalist family after the Declaration? After the Declaration of Independence was adopted, life became difficult for Loyalists. Some left and went to Canada or England. If you stayed, you probably kept quiet. You and your family could show your feelings only if you felt protected by British troops. You might have to move to Georgia, New Jersey, or New York, where there were a large number of Loyalists. Loyalists had to pay heavy taxes on their property. They couldn't buy or sell land. In some areas, the land and belongings of Loyalists were taken, and the people forced to leave to seek help from other Loyalists. Sometimes patriots attacked them or burned their homes. Loyalists couldn't vote or hold office. They couldn't be lawyers or teachers. Some Loyalists were put in jail or had to pay money as a promise that they would not help the British troops. A Declaration of Dependence was written in late 1776 and signed by 700 Loyalists. This made the patriots more angry.